Dear friends, English literature, Elizabethan and Jacobean drama, Balpony by Ben Jonson, brief questions with answers. Brief questions 172 to 18. Question 170. How does Moscow prove his innocence when Bonario refuses to speak to him? Answer. When Bonario refuses to speak to Moscow, the latter proves his innocence by false tears. Question 171. What does Moscow tell Bonario about his father is going to do? Answer. Moscow tells Bonario that the latter's father is going to disinherit him. Question 172. Why does Bonario agree to go with Moscow to Balpony's house? Answer. Bonario agrees to go with Moscow to Balpony's house in order to prove whether his father disinherits him or not. Question 173. How are Nano, Castron, and Androgino are entertaining themselves? Answer. Nano, Castron, and Androgino are entertaining themselves by seeing who should be the head of them. Question 174. How does Moscow earn his livelihood? Answer. Moscow earns his livelihood by flattering his patron and by servile behavior. Question 175. How does Moscow create enmity among friends? Answer. Moscow creates enmity among friends by spreading lies or by doing secret damage through flattery. Question 176. Why is Balpony fed up with Lady Polity would be? Answer. Balpony is fed up with Lady Polity would be because of her constant terror about meaningless things. Question 177. Why is Balpony disappointed when Lady Woodby comes? Answer. When Lady Woodby comes, Balpony is disappointed because he hears that she will destroy his appetite for Celia. Question 178. Who is the poet as old as rhyme as Plato? As old in rhyme as Plato? Answer. Sophocles. Question 179. How does Moscow rescue Balpony from Lady Woodby? Answer. Moscow rescues his master by telling her that her husband is rowing in a gondola with the most cunning courtesan of Venice. Question 180. What does Lady Woodby fuse over when she comes to Balpony? Answer. When she comes to Balpony, she fuses over her own appearance, noting her dress does not show her neck enough, but that she is still dressed well. Question 171. Why does Lady Woodby berate Balpony's servant woman? Answer. She berates Balpony's servant woman for not dressing appropriately and not making themselves up in an appropriate way. Question 182. Why does Lady Polity complain her clothes don't show off her neck? Answer. Lady Polity complains her clothes don't show off her neck because she wants to attract Balpony's attention by exposing her neck. Question 183. What does Balpony tell Lady Woodby about his dream? Answer. Balpony tells her that he had a strange dream the previous night, that a strange fury entered his house and tore his roof off with her voice. Question 84. Troubles with the noise. I cannot sleep. I dreamed that a strange fury entered now my house and with a dreadful tempest of her breath. What does Balpony refer to by strange fury? Answer. Balpony here refers to Lady Woodby. Question 185. What is Lady Woodby's reaction when Balpony describes his dream? Answer. She ignores the obvious reference to herself and begins a very one-sided conversation, advising Balpony on what medicines he should take to cure his bad dream. Question 186. My good angel, save me. Who is the speaker? Whom does the speaker want to be saved from? Answer. Balpony is the speaker. He wants to be saved from Lady Woodby. Question 187. My good angel, save me. Who answers Balpony's prayer? Answer. Balpony's prayer to be rescued from Lady Polity are answered them when Moscow finally returns. Question 188. How is Balponi saved from Lady Utpe? Answer. When Moscow tells her that her husband is rowing in a gondola with the most cunning courtesan of Venice, Lady Politic believes Moscow completely and runs up to search for her husband with the dwarf. Thus, Balponi is saved. Question 189. Who is Corbachev going to make her here? Answer. Corbachev is going to make Balponi his heir. Question 190. Why does Corbachev want to make Balponi his heir? Answer. Corbachev wants to make Balponi his heir in order to please him so that he can inherit Balponi's wealth. Question 191. Why does Moscow tell Bonario to hide from his father? Answer. Moscow tells Bonario to hide from his father so that he can watch his father disinherit his son and make Balponi his heir. Question 192. I have to be decreed. It must be done. Who says this or what must be done? Answer. Corvino says this to his wife Celia. He tells his wife that his decision is final and she must sleep with Balponi. Question 193. What did Corvino want his wife to do with Balponi? Answer. Corvino wants his wife Celia to sleep with Balponi. Question 194. What did Celia want Corvino to do with her to her instead of sleeping with Balponi? Answer. Celia begs not to be forced to sleep with Balponi. She asks that she be locked up instead, since she thinks Corvino doubts her chastity. Question 195. What is Corvino's opinion about honor? Answer. Honor, according to Corvino, does not exist in reality, and the loss of it cannot harm anyone. Question 196. Why does Corvino threaten to drag her, Celia, through the street? Answer. Celia begs a final time to be spared having to sleep with Balponi, but Corvino insists and threatens to drag her through the streets and proclaim her a whore if he does not comply. Question 187. Why does Corvino think Balponi will not take advantage of Celia? As Corvino thinks that Balponi is so old that he will not take much advantage of his wife Celia. Question 198. What happens when Balponi is alone with Celia? Answer. When Balponi is alone with Celia, he begins to seduce her in different ways. Question 199. How does Balponi try to seduce Celia? Answer. At first, Balponi tries to seduce her by offering different kinds of alluring things and enjoyment. Being failed, he then tries to seduce her by force. Question 200. Balponi details the serious pleasure to whom? I repeat, please. Balponi details the sensuous pleasures to whom? Answer. Balponi details the sensuous pleasures to Celia. He tells her that all the sensuous pleasures she will have if she becomes his lover. Question 201. Who is Lolia Paulina? Answer. Lolia Paulina is the wife of the Emperor Caligula. She used to wear her fabulously precious jewelry even on ordinary occasions. Question 202. Why does Balponi get enraged? Answer. Balponi details all the sensuous pleasures Celia will have if she becomes his lover. But Celia is unmoved and she refuses his advances, asking him to stop offering. So Balponi is enraged by her refusal. Question 203. If Celia does not comply willingly, what will Balponi do to her? Answer. If Celia does not comply willingly, then he will take her by force. Question 204. Who rescues Celia from Balponi? Answer. Bonario rescues Celia from Balponi. Question 205. When does Bonario rescue Celia from Balponi? And so when Volpone is at the point of ravishing Celia, Bonario jumps out from behind his hiding place and rescues her. Question 26. Why does Volpone lament when Bonario rescues Celia? Answer: when Bonario rescues Celia, Volpone laments that his calm has been exposed. Question 27. Who wanted Mosca? Answer: Bonario wanted Mosca. Question 28. Why is Mosca wanted by Bonario? Answer: when Bonario rescues Mosca from the clutches of Volpone, Mosca comes to find his master in despair, and at the time, Bonario owns him with a sword. Question 29. Why is Mosca's face bleeding? Answer: Mosca's face is bleeding because of a sword wound that Bonario has given him on his way out. Question 210. Who is concerned about Mosca's bleeding? Answer: Volpone is concerned about Mosca's bleeding. Question 211. Why does Mosca blame himself for Bonario's discovery of Volpone's deceit? Answer: Mosca blames himself for Bonario's discovery of Volpone's deceit because Mosca himself bids Bonario stay in the library. Question 212. What is Mosca wounded by? Mosca is wounded by a sword. Question 213. Why doesn't Bonario kill Volpone while the former saves Celia from the latter? Answer: Bonario does not kill Volpone only because he wants to see him punished at the hands of law. Question 214. Why had Mosca said he had made himself feel miserable? Answer: Mosca thought that because of his miscalculation, Volpone's deceit had been discovered by Bonario, so he said he made himself feel miserable. Question 215. What does Mosca suggest to Volpone after Volpone's deceit has been discovered? Answer: after Volpone's deceit has been discovered by Bonario, Mosca suggests Volpone that both he and Volpone should commit suicide. Let us die like Romans, since we have lived like Grecians. Question 216. Why does Mosca suggest suicide? Answer: Mosca suggests suicide in order to escape dishonor. Question 217. What does Mosca mean by let us die like Romans, since we have lived like Grecians? Answer: the Romans used to kill themselves rather than suffer the indignity of being captured by the enemy, and the ancient Greeks used to lead a voluptuous life. So Mosca here means that as they have lived a voluptuous life like the Greeks, they should commit suicide to escape dishonor like the Romans. Question 218. Hark, who is there? What does Volpone hear? Answer: Volpone believes he hears soldiers coming on foot to apprehend them. Thank you friends for watching my video.